On to today's Scaling with People podcast, I'm Guinevere Curry, your host and founder and CEO to Guide to HR. So, have you ever heard the term corporate governance and immediately pictured a shadowy, dark boardroom filled with stern-faced executives whispering secrets and plotting world domination? Yeah, I have too, right? I don't ever want to talk about governance, but here we are. We're going to talk about it today because guess what? It's not as scary as you think. In fact, it's something every business, big or small, startup, been in business forever, should be thinking about. I'm so excited to be having Anoushka on the call today to tell us a little bit more about why this isn't scary and why every company should be thinking about it. So welcome, Anoushka, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Guinevere. Thanks very much for having me. And it's really funny that we're talking about corporate governance because our two countries are at economic war right now. So I was thinking, I hope we're not committing an act of treason by talking to
Oh
each
no.
other right
Yes,
now.
because you're in Canada and I'm in the States.
Yeah, that's right. And we've got a very important hockey game going down in an hour's time. Canada's
Yep.
political sovereignty might be on the line if we don't pull out a win here. So I'm a little bit nervous, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, no, thank you for the invitation. I am the founder of my own company, Marcelino Marie Solutions, and I am a corporate governance consultant. And part of the reason I wanted to go into this work is such an emerging need that I am seeing all across the board, as you said in your introduction, nonprofits, small community groups, huge multinational businesses. I think coming out of COVID, which was a watershed for so many different areas, people are starting to realize that if we don't have plans for things like mass absences, a workforce that might just up and leave because they decide they want to do something else, business continuity in the face of risks, if companies aren't equipped to have systems to deal with these kinds of challenges, they're not going to be very successful. So, especially in the world of startup, it's sometimes go, go, go all the time. You're really thinking about growing. If you don't take a minute to just think about some of the base foundations, some of your growth could be compromised, and we don't want to see that. So, I'm hoping that I can provide a few practical tips for people to think about as they're going about building their own businesses.
I love it. And as you're talking, I literally jumped to a fear I had last week where one of my clients, they had a huge offsite, brought up more than 50% of their employee population, and they were all coming from similar places. So my brain was thinking, I really hope they're not on the same plane. And worst case scenario, doomsday thinking, that plane doesn't make it, right? Like I would pray no matter what, every plane makes it to their destination. But like, as a company, if you're losing half of your employee population because they're on the same plane and that plane doesn't make it, oh my gosh, you've totally like destroyed your business. So putting in smart policies to ensure that that doesn't happen. And, unfortunately, if a plane doesn't make it, you might lose 2 or 3 of your employees, but not 30, 40, 50, or like, 50%, 60% of your employee population. So yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were talking. Such a simple policy to protect your business continuity.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes the words corporate governance sound really big and really scary. So people either don't want to deal with it or they think it's really boring. And then they don't also want to deal with it because it's not the sexy thing that's getting attention. So for me, the one tip that I would give people is think about corporate governance. Just reduce it down to what is the system that you have in place to make decisions about how you're going to hire, how you're going to advertise, how you're going to react in the event of some sort of threat or opportunity that's facing your business, and write it down. What is the process that you have taken to document those thought processes or those other processes, and just make sure that they are transparent so that your staff know what to expect, your vendors or your partners know what to expect, your funders know what to expect, and you can then operate in a very consistent way. Corporate governance, whether that is your employee handbook, the way that you hire, your approach to occupational health and safety, all of that ties into what your company brand is. And it will help you to inform decisions about your social media presence, your active marketing or advertising in a very consistent way that helps you stay true to whatever values or mission you have decided to create for yourself.
And your overall brand too. As
Absolutely.
again, as you're talking about, I kind of like envision like, on a personal level, you should know where your urgent care is, where your emergency room is, because when you need it, that's when you don't have the mental capacity to be like looking it up on your phone or your app or going to your carrier or asking your HR person or whatever it is, however you're going to get that information, right? You're just going to go to wherever it is that you should be going. And so having that be known ahead of time, so when you get into that emergency state, it's not this frazzle moment. You can execute very cleanly, get to a place where you're taking care of that emergency and you can survive it, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what companies are starting to see is it's better to take, a day and do some planning around what are the key aspects of your business that you might need to think about from an emergency preparedness perspective, rather than the old way of doing things, which is wait for a problem to crop up, whether it's around a perceived conflict of interest or professional conduct that might lead to some sort of a complaint on an HR side of things, and instead put those things out as policies or statements or processes beforehand so that there's some guidance in place for when the unexpected does happen and you're not starting from scratch, but you've got some sort of a policy or a directive that can help you in the right direction.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, it's all about tying it back to your mission, your vision, your virtues, your or values, your overall brand, and having calm moments where you can think about that to create what the execution plan looks like, rather than being in that urgent, like hair on fire, dumpster fire situation where you're just trying to like get the fire out. Then you're going to be able to have a smoother transit and solve the problem more likely faster as well.
Yeah, and I think, even for smaller startups, this is a really great opportunity to, I'm going to steal a phrase from your recent guest who spoke about company communication, but he used the frame of involve, inform, and inspire your team. These are great ways, whether it's the development of corporate values formally or an employee handbook, or, something as operational as your guide to how you're going to procure goods and services from other parties. Get your staff involved. More than likely, they're the subject matter experts. They probably have a good read on what are the big risks or trends or opportunities that we should be paying attention to based on what sector we're in, and what are the things that should really be consuming our attention from a planning standpoint, so that we've done that risk analysis. We have a sense of how we're going to mitigate those risks if they should come to pass. And if there is some sort of a, God forbid we live through another pandemic, but if there is some sort of a massive disruption of that nature, what are the things that we have thought about that will help us have that competitive advantage and be more prepared potentially than other people in our sector? And, use AI. I'm saying write things down. These don't need to be really difficult, drawn out processes. There are lots of technology pieces that can take your ideas and help you in creating some tools that will be with you to guide the company in its day-to-day work.
Yeah, and I honestly think just keeping it simple, like keep it simple. It makes it easier to execute, makes it easy for everyone to understand exactly the intent and what they're supposed to do. The more like, 40-page document is not gonna, no one's gonna execute on that, right? Like four bullet points if you can, right? Maybe it needs to be 4 pages, but keep it simple, keep it really crisp, like third grade language or seventh or 12th, or
Absolutely.
depending on, your org, but like just simplify it so that it's easy to execute, and then make sure you put it in a place that's easy to find, right? That's another one. Right. So where does one start? Because this feels, if I was as a business owner, this feels very daunting. Like, do I start on the HR side? Do I start on my finance side? Do I start on the marketing side? Do I start like how the business, like where does one start? How do they can just the baby step motion to get moving?
Yeah, and I think you probably want to start with the thing that is consuming most of your time, the thing that's keeping you up at night right now. What is the thing that you seem to be focused on? So is it, we don't really seem to have a good mechanism for reporting our financial success back to our funders or our shareholders? Is that your biggest concern? Are you experiencing a lot of turnover right now, or are you finding it hard to attract talent into your organization. And so maybe there's some critical skills gaps. Then you might want to think about being more explicit on, okay, we need to be very clear about what our values are, what kind of a culture we're trying to build, or that kind of a thing. If you're producing something and there are some really real health and safety risks for the employees that are in your company, maybe you want to start with occupational health and safety and making sure, are we at least, in bare minimum compliance with whatever regulatory regime we're operating under, and do staff feel safe? What are we doing to communicate that and show that we care about them going home to their families every single night? So start with that one problem. There are so many different aspects. So HR, finance, legal, procurement, stakeholder relations. There could be any number of them, and it can get very overwhelming. So start with one. To your point, keep it simple, write it down so that there is a common reference point. And I think when we're forced to write things down, it forces us to think through kind of start to end. How would somebody with no context interpret this? Make sure that you're using very, very plain language, and go from there, because that in itself, just taking that one big problem, might spur you to think about other areas that you may want to tackle later. And if where you get is addressing one problem, but you've made a sequence of what are the priorities you want to address next, you're probably further ahead than you think.
Yeah. And you may even have some things already in place. It's just more of the organization and just making sure people know where to find it and how to execute on what you already may have in place too.
Absolutely. And to your point, I just can't stress enough keeping it simple. I have worked a lot with organizations that will spend weeks or months developing this beautiful SharePoint library or some sort of an intranet. And then what happens in 6 months when you actually
It's
need something?
outdated.
No one's kept it updated. It's
Yeah.
full of, obsolete materials. It points to people that aren't even with the company anymore. So the simpler you can keep it, the more motivation you're going to have to make sure it stays updated. And that in itself can be part of your business continuity planning, is making sure that as you go about your operations and your planning for the year, you've allocated a little bit of time to review what you've already got on the books and make sure, okay, does this still make sense for our evolving context? Do we need to update it? Is there anything we can lose? Is there something new that we need to add in? Even if it's once a year, that would,
Yeah.
again, put
Well, just like
many
any other
companies
thing,
ahead of their
you should,
competitors.
it's not a one and done, right? Just like any other thing
Right.
that you're working on, it's not one and done. You have to reiterate on it. You have to update it. You have to keep it alive. And just kind of thinking about a really good example, like corporate governance to me, like that's just like my mind just goes in so many different directions. But if we want to really keep it simple, it's basically an SOP of a process. If you like, this is how you do this process. If this happens, this is what you need to do. And even like thinking about what's like from an HR perspective, what's the most important thing? Paying our people. Like that, like
Mm.
legally, I gotta pay the people on time. Depending on what country, there's different ramifications, but that's like, so what happens if the person that runs payroll gets hit by a bus or gets sick or goes out on vacation and doesn't communicate something, and all of a sudden now you need to do it, and you like, I don't know how to run payroll kind of thing, right? So if there's an SOP in that situation, you will prepare and be successful on executing in any kind of situation you might find yourself in. But an SOP can literally be just like a couple of steps. It doesn't have to be some crazy document that like you're not going to want to read. You may throw into AI and be like, okay, AI, tell me what I need to do based off of this, right?
Absolutely. And I think the other things that it does is it really clarifies the levels of decision making for different topics. So, going back to how this could relate to values, depending on the size of your organization, how flat do you want to make it? How much empowerment do you want to give to staff when they're dealing with clients or customers or anybody else that they may be working with? Is there a real centralization that you want to make sure that everything is run in a very consistent way, or do you want to have it more dispersed? So there might be more variation in how things go, but then again, you as the founder are going to be dealing with a lot less of those issues, and you can provide training or standards for people to follow. So you've got some sort of backup in terms of measuring people's performance or client satisfaction.
And it all can also help you be scalable too. So as you grow, you now have this documentation in place that can help people get ramped up depending on the different types of documentation, right? They know what's going on. They know who the players are. They know who the decision makers are. So that can be very helpful in a scaling organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what kind of trends, as you're working with different customers and clients out there, what kind of trends are you seeing, especially in 2025?
Well, I am very excited for my business that this is simply an area that is starting to get attention. I think for too long, we all sort of managed by emergency. So
Mhm.
there were a lot of times we wouldn't take the time to think about these things in advance. And when an urgent situation came up, you're trying to deal with it and then also trying to put in rules at the same time to prevent a recurrence. That's not, operating under that kind of pressure doesn't always produce the best results. So again, I think COVID forced so many people to relook at the way they ran their businesses because no one had ever planned for what are we going to do if half of our workforce is sick and isn't, by law not allowed to come into the office because we had to keep everybody isolated. Pursuant to that, we also saw the great resignation happen. What happens when people just up and leave? They decide, nope, I'm going to either start my own business, I'm going to take early retirement, I'm going to go work at Starbucks so I have less stress in my life. Succession planning really wasn't something that people talked about. I think, there had been this idea that all these baby boomers were going to leave the workforce in droves. That didn't quite happen. We're probably starting to see it a bit now. And even with that happening, and with millennials bringing such different expectations for the workforce and not necessarily signing on to this idea of company loyalty long term, it's forced a lot of on the fly management. So I'm just happy to see that regardless of circumstance or size, more organizations are starting to think about this more proactively so that they're giving themselves the time and the space to get prepared, so that they're better equipped to deal with the unexpected when it inevitably does come.
Yeah, and a good leader is one who's always looking around the corner before you're ready to turn, right? And trying to prepare for what is around that corner and set expectations and put plans in place so that you can tackle whatever the beast or the pothole or whatever is out there, right? Like being able to just kind of make sure you're leading that business through continuity and growth. So, uh, well, as we wrap up here, I'd love to get some insight from you on any last like final thoughts or tidbits on when you're thinking about corporate governance, or I'm going to call it an SOP because I feel like that's a little less scarier. What other takeaways should we be thinking about, or ways that we should be handling this within our business?
So I think you can distill the whole concept down into a couple of key questions that you should spend some time thinking about, either yourself or with your leadership team. What are the biggest dangers our company faces? What are the biggest opportunities that we can seize? Um, what have we decided on as process to get through any of those things? How have we documented them? And how are we using AI to make our lives easier in doing this? If you really break corporate governance down to those elements, ultimately it's about identifying the areas where you might need to have some sort of a policy or an SOP in place, thinking about what the major risks or potential risks to your business are and working through what mitigation plans could be. And then making sure you're involving your staff in either the development of these things or at least the information and the communication and the training of them so that you don't have these sterile documents, but they become lived expectations through your workforce.
Yeah. I love the AI about it too, because if you have something already in place, AI can help you incorporate that into a, more structure if you need it. And you can actually have it help you update your content and use AI to help you keep it alive and keep it growing, and making sure that people know where to find it, depending on what AI tools you have in-house already or not. There's a lot of cool tools out there that can help you basically create a bot for your employees or management to ask a question, and it searches your documentation and your wiki site or whatever it is you have. So yeah, AI is becoming a really good friend of ours, I think, in some capacity, especially in documentation landscape.
And I'm really happy to hear you say that from an HR perspective too, because I think there's a lot of fear around AI still that the robots are coming for their jobs. Certainly, I think there's a lot of benefit to be had in taking advantage of it to automate certain things, but it's going to free you up for these uh, higher level discussions or conversations that, maybe AI can help you with, but ultimately it comes down to what's the alignment to values and how does your company specifically want to think about these things. So, being able to leverage a bot to do some of that lower level work to give you more capacity to think about some of these more foundational and important things is super, super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Anoushka. It was fun talking. It's actually fun talking about corporate governance for
There you
once,
go.
maybe. I don't know. But I hope our listeners got some fun things out of it, and maybe we made it a little less scary for them and start just to, it's all about baby steps. We all have a lot going on in our world. There's a lot of noise everywhere. And my recommendation to you is just baby step it. One little bite, and all of a sudden you look back 3, 6 months later, you're like, wow, I got a lot done versus trying to like consume the whole thing at once. It's like I use the analogy of you're an ant trying to eat a hamburger. You can't eat it in one bite, right? But you can
That's
eat
right.
it over
Yeah.
time. But it's these baby bites and these baby steps that help you get there. And lean on your team, right? Like hopefully you're not a company of one, but if you are, okay, then baby bites. And if you're not, have your team members help you. And if you all do baby bites, you're going to be able to get through it and keep it alive and really build a good foundation for your business to scale and grow and not end up being obsolete because something happened and you didn't have a plan to help your business get through it.
Like so many things in life, starting is the hardest part. So,
Mhm.
thank you for listening because even thinking about it is probably a good step for most founders to get going on. So, yeah, hopefully we've demystified it a little bit, and people have been able to take away a couple of tips.
And if they have any questions they want to ask you, or how can they find you?
So, my company is Marcelino Marie Solutions .com is my website. I'm also
We'll
on
have the link
LinkedIn.
on the bottom.
Yeah, and I would love to chat with anyone that wants to know a little bit more or discuss how I might be able to support them.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. And until next time, have a great day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Take it easy. Thank you. Bye.